can I ask, are there any declarations of interest relevant to today's meeting, or if there are any changes to the register of interests, please indicate, let me know. Probably put up your hand would be the best way to do it. No, okay. In which case then let us just note the fact that this meeting is obviously recorded. We know that members of the public sometimes join the meeting in real time or sometimes like to look at it afterwards. If you do want to put, as a member of the public, any question or comment in the chat, we'll very happily attend to it at the end of the meeting. Or of course, if you're looking at it after the event, you know, there are details on the website about how to get in touch. So we do genuinely welcome your participation and want to be accessible if there's anything that comes up in the meeting that you'd like to understand or explore further. And the first substantive item on today's agenda is item 4, which is the Chief Exec briefing. So Hal, if you're ready to speak to that, that will be much appreciated.
Good afternoon all, and I'm indeed ready. So this is my first Chief Exec report since being substantively appointed, and I should say, just as a brief thing, thank you very much to everyone on this call who was supportive or helped me with advice and guidance in that interview process. So I appreciate everyone's time, and I appreciate everyone's time regarding the interview and stakeholder process as well. So I'm very pleased and honoured to be sitting in front of you all today, albeit on Teams, but perhaps soon face to face. Couple of things. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read the report. There's obviously been some events that have happened in the last few weeks regarding the Queen's Jubilee and National Thank You Day and Volunteers Week and things, and hopefully the report highlights some of those positive things that have happened within the hospital recently, and also some positive things coming up around, for example, the NHS birthday celebrations. I think moving on from that, just a couple of things to mention. There's obviously been lots in the news about monkeypox. To the best of my knowledge, we still haven't had any cases in the Derbyshire area, so perhaps that's more the a public panic about a new virus in the context of us recently having COVID. It's perhaps what's happening there. Sort of moving on, and probably more importantly, just to highlight a couple of things about operational risks, elective care recovery, and so on, because they're the things that we're in reality dealing with on a day-to-day basis. This is what's occupying our minds in the hospital in real life. To highlight, clearly there's an awful lot of work going on in the hospital, particularly around elective care recovery. There's a national focus on things like the 104-week recovery plans, which is to get rid of our 104-week waiters. I mean, it's awful, isn't it? 104-week waits. It's a 2-year wait for your treatment, but that is the new reality that we've moved into since COVID, because before we didn't have any 52-week waiters, but now it's 104. We are confident that by the end of this month at Chesterfield, we will have, and it's literally 2 or 3 cases who are 104-week waiters left. The national ambition was to have none left by the end of June. The 2 or 3 cases are related to patient choice. So perhaps not surprisingly, if you've been waiting 2 weeks for your operation and then you're suddenly told, well, you can have it next week, and actually you've got your holiday booked for next week, then you say, well, can I have it 2 weeks after that? And so the reality is that some of the cases that are outstanding are related to patient choice, and I think in one case is complex surgery needs. But from an organisation point of view, we feel we have that in hand. From a point of view of the elective care recovery in general, we think our plans are ambitious, but we feel we do have a fair chance to be able to complete and succeed with the delivery of those plans. So everyone will be working very hard in order to manage that, but we do feel we're on track to deliver those ambitious plans that have been set out by the government, at least locally. It may not be quite the same across the Derbyshire system, which we're obviously part of. And one of the things that as an organisation we'll need to get our head round is that sometimes we're going to need to support other providers in a way that may be slightly detrimental to our own inverted commas patients, because we may need to do some equalising of waiting lists, which will be for overall patient benefit within Derbyshire, which may be a challenge to our teams who are trying very hard to do their very best for our own patients. Moving on from that, I was trying really hard in the report not to have any acronyms in it because of previous comments, but I think there's one has slipped through at the bottom of the third page, which is it's regarding the nursing and midwifery review, and there's a bit about EPR development, and EPR stands for the electronic patient record. So I apologise that one slipped through. But just on the EPR, so the electronic patient record, just yesterday, John Court, as our Chief Digital Officer, was informed that we've been provisionally allocated money over a substantive amount of money over the next 3 years in order to put in a full electronic patient record. We have a sort of hybrid at the moment where some of our records are electronic and some are paper, but that we've been given the money both from a capital and revenue point of view to be able to do that in the next 3 years. That money is very separate from other money. It's a completely distinct source. But the positive thing is we've been, following a sort of bidding process, we've been given that. So looking forward to the future, that'll be a really good thing for our patients. It'll be a challenge, and hopefully a challenge that we'll meet by fully engaging all the different people and users in the hospital, but it will be a positive thing. Moving on, just to highlight, because I know it's always of interest, and perhaps particularly to governors around rural primary care. When I was looking at the numbers for this, actually the numbers of calls and appointments that rural primary care provide is startling, and when you actually think about the figures. So we talk about that we handle 25,000 calls a month now at rural primary care. Ballpark figures, we have about 50,000 patients. So every other patient is ringing every month and being dealt with by our RPC. So it's just to give and that's more than 1,000 calls a day across RPC. So it's to give a bit of an idea of the scale of the calls that we're managing. And we've now improved the call response rate so that 87% of calls are responded to within 10 minutes. Now you could say 10 minutes is quite a long time to be hanging on the phone. So I'm not suggesting at all that the situation is perfect, but we have made considerable strides, and we're in a much better position now with that than we were previously. And we know there's still more to do, and part of that is, for example, the new digital trying to think of the word for it, but the new digital system, which will allow people to link in with rural primary care in a way for people doing that digitally rather than having everything to have to go through the phones, which should help things further. And that's been started, the rollout, and it's a soft rollout, and it's being increased over these weeks. And so far that's working well. So that's a positive thing. And I guess the other important bit to emphasise is that at the moment, so patient satisfaction scores about recommending rural primary care are at 83%, which is, again, room for improvement, but is better than it has been in previous months. So that's just a couple of things to highlight. The final thing really for me to highlight, to welcome, is Caroline, who has been substantively appointed as our new Director of Human Resources and Organisational Development. Many of you will have met Caroline before because she's been in that as an interim role, and before that as as a deputy, but she's now been substantively appointed, so I was very pleased to appoint and to welcome her, and equally not on the call today to highlight the appointment of Zoe Knockley as our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and again to welcome her. And I think both of those appointments are really good appointments, and again to thank all of you who are involved in interview processes and stakeholder panels for your time, because it's a really useful contribution that we get from you as governors to that, because those stakeholder panels only work well if we have a variety of opinions coming in about what's needed. So I'll pause there. Hopefully the report is clear and informative, but please tell me if not, because then I'll try and adapt and change for future governors' meetings. Thank you. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Hal. Norman, please.
Thank you, Hal, and you're very welcome to that position. I think it was a very good appointment, and well done. Your report, I found that very easy to read, with the headings and all the relevant information underneath it. As a governor, I found it very, very easy to read and very informative. And thank you for the lack of acronyms. We're not all medical, and I don't have to keep getting the acronym sheet out and what does that mean, what does that mean. So thank you in that respect, and please carry on doing that. I think it's easy for the governors to read. So thank you, and welcome to the appointment.
Thank you very much, Norman. Nice vote of thanks on behalf of the whole of the council, I feel sure. Berenice.
Thanks, Helen. I just first of all want to check with Hal. You did want us to link in around the finances into your report, just to give a quick overview still.
Yes, so it's not mentioned in the report, but if you thought that was a sensible time to link into that, Helen, is that all right if we talk about that now, because it's probably sensible to follow? Yeah.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, Steve can't be here today, but he's given me a few bullet points just to share with you on behalf. So Steve and I are working really closely together on the operational plan, and you've just heard Hal describe how we're really trying to get back to 100% of the levels 1920. We're actually trying to do more than that where possible, and help the system out to make sure that we're kind of delivering that care to patients that have been waiting such a long time. As a result of that, we also have to put in our financial plan and statement what our intentions are. And back on the 28th of April, our submission for Joined Up Care Derbyshire was a deficit of £66 million. The CRH position within that was a £15.5 million deficit. And obviously that's a real concern for NHSIE. And we certainly had we've had a number of discussions with them about asking us to deliver a balanced plan and do further work on it. The key changes that have already taken place since the 28th of April is that we've looked to close that gap with a combination of inflationary and additional confirmed funding of £28 million, and that was £10 million towards additional funds that came in for the Ambulance Trust, EMAS, East Midlands Ambulance Service, and also inflationary costs that were recognised that have been added to our budgets for this year. The assumed additional elective recovery funds, so if we can guarantee that we can get to 100%, there is additional funds that will be paid to us, and that's to a sum of £10 million, which will help. And a proposal to spend £28 million less across the actual Joined Up Care Derbyshire. Also, just to mention that our current capital do minimum plan for the system is currently £3.6 million over committed as well. So we've been asked to reduce that down. Just recently on Friday at the system leadership team meeting, a number of proposals were pulled together through the financial leads working with the operational leads. And what has been agreed so that we can deliver a balanced plan is that there is that commitment to deliver that financial plan. There's a commitment to deliver in 3%, and we've already got our plans. We've worked through what our 3% efficiency plans are for our organisation. I'm not going to say that's going to be easy, and we are already monitoring and working through what those costs are for us. The note of the additional money that's been an allocation for East Midlands Ambulance Service and inflation. The agreement of the principle that we will deliver the 100%, so we will accept the additional elective recovery fund. We have agreed to effectively spend the £28 million less, and what we're looking at is the uncommitted spend, and most of that uncommitted spend at the moment sits with the CCG and sits with UHDB, so that's currently being worked through, so that we make sure that we don't uncommit something that is absolutely essential to patient care. So there's some further work to do around that. And then the final bit is that there's an agreement to the principle of redistributing resources. So we couldn't have the CCG having money in the pot at the end of the year with us reporting a deficit. So there has been agreement now to make sure that that's shared out. So that's all I wanted to say on the finances, Hal, but we are committed to submit a balanced plan. Thanks.
There's probably a word or two I should add. Obviously, Bernice will have told you what a roller coaster we've been on. You know, we've been a very respectable trust who's always kind of worked to our budget or within a hair's breadth of our budget, yeah? So this sort of scale of departure into deficit was a huge concern. Now, the fact that we happen to have come magically, and we have no members of the public on this call, so I've used the word advisedly, but serendipitously, magically, whatever the appropriate professional word is, back to a balanced budget, shouldn't for a second lead us to underestimate the scale of the challenge. And we're going to have to really think about, you know, how it is we deliver our efficiency programme, how it is we deliver transformation, and how it is we're really mindful about stewarding resources in a very careful way now into the future. So whilst it's a much happier position to be in, and all credit to not only our own colleagues in finance, but colleagues in finance across the system for the position we've got to, there's a lot that lies below the waterline that we need to be very good stewards of. So we will be having a meeting called at relatively short notice because of the timelines we've been working to on Monday. And I was going to issue an invitation to Margaret and perhaps one or two other governors who might be free or have an interest in joining that meeting. Mindful of the fact that, you know, it is very short notice, but just so that you're aware that that invitation is there, because there's going to be so many difficult decisions now over the next 12 months. We really would want governors to have something of a bird's eye view of what some of the complexities that lie below the headline are. So probably best maybe to leave that with Nicola to write around after the meeting. But just, you know, I suppose to have that on your radar. So thank you, Bernice, for you know, bringing that to the fore. John Kay, please.
Hello, welcome to the Trust. I've got one question related to the Dr. Link situation. Many of our users are using the NHS app to control patient records and to sort of get things like COVID vaccination information. I just wanted to make sure that there is an oversight to make sure that when you've got your links that they can link into this UK global NHS app, so that if you want the preference, you can actually put your both your doctor's records and your hospital records to link in so that you can get the notifications automatically and things like that. So it was just an oversight just to make sure that it's, shall we say, in the mind of the non-execs to make sure that that happens. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond to that, Helen?
Yes, why not?
So John, thank you for that. At the minute, the two apps absolutely don't talk to each other, but we have got that in mind. So that the doctor link is all about being able to do those assessments about the prioritization of how quickly you need an appointment, and so that we can get to those with the most need first. In the doctor's practices, and others that could obviously can wait some time. You can still use the NHS app for that information, and that still does link into the GP practice. But we'll take that on board and just remind them about how we link those two.
Ruth, you had a question in the pre-meet about Dr. Link. Is it now the right time to raise that too, just to stick with this thread?
Yeah, it was just that I'd seen it on probably on the Facebook or Twitter that the Dr. Link was starting. So it was a new word to me. So what actually was it all about? I didn't realise it was going to be anything to do with the NHS. I actually thought it was to do with Royal Primary Care.
So Ruth, this is in a number of practices across the country. If Keith was here, he's an absolute expert in this area. But we've decided to roll this out because we had access problems, as you well know. In most of the practices, there's such a delay in answering all of the telephony. So we've agreed to adopt this, and what it basically does is it does a triage and it does an assessment for you so that you understand how quickly that you need that appointment, and directs those patients straight through so they can still access the receptionist and get those appointments booked in quickly. And it is taken quite what it is. The benefit of it is it's taken quite a lot of activity out of the front doors, so those that are critical are actually managing to get through much quicker. We could bring back at some point, Helen, an update from Royal Primary Care that shows the benefits already we're starting to demonstrate with the access for patients, because we're monitoring this as it goes into the system. So it is to try and help it. And the other bit, Ruth, is just to say that there are people who are very uncomfortable using something digital, and we are still continuing to support them with the previous methods, and try and guide them through and see if we can get them onto the system. But if we can't, we do understand that not everybody can use that.
So is it having, I know it's going to say it doesn't, but how different is that to N111? It's hard to put that into words, but you're talking about the word triage, which will come general practice and 111.
Yeah, this is, I suppose it is in a way it's more personable, whereas the NHS pathways is very much scripted, isn't it? And
yes,
it's more about your urgent requirement for care, whereas this is more about, you know, if you've got a long-term condition and actually you need booked in to see a diabetic nurse, it'll direct you into being booked into those slots. So it's more about the right person for you at a lower level, at a GP practice level.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll hear more about this in due course, but thank you for that taster, Berenice. Mike.
This question for Hal, I'm not sure this is the right time to bring it up, but it's in relation to Royal Primary Care and workload. I read a disturbing report, I think it was in the Derby Telegraph, about number of patients per GP. The top of the list was RPC West, which apparently had nearly 6,000 patients per whole-time equivalent. I don't know whether this represents the whole story, but I just welcome your comments on that.
I'm sure 6,000 per GP isn't the whole story. Nationally, it's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, and I don't think that it's such an outlier from that point of view. So I'm not quite sure how the figures have been calculated, and I'd have to see the actual article. What is true for RPC, though, over a long period of time, is that we have maximised the, if you like, the alternative workforce. So, you know, whether that's nurse specialists or pharmacy prescribers or advanced clinical practitioners, that initially out of necessity, we had to do that in RPC because we had a lot of GP gaps when we first took on RPC, and subsequently because actually often those people are better placed to deal with lots of the things that happen in a general practice, compared, so that you're maximising the bits where a GP is needed, you're maximising GP availability for where they're needed, if that makes sense. So RPC has been a bit at the forefront in Derbyshire of that alternative workforce model in a way that lots of other practices also do it. Now, that may skew the figures to some degree, but it's certainly not 6,000 patients per GP. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what the total numbers at RPC West are, and I think it's about, is it 12,000, Berenice? Is it something like that? So we don't just have 1.5 GPs at our, or 2 GPs at RPC. We have more than that. But it's also the case that one of the things that we're doing with RPC is that we are getting that workforce to work flexibly in different parts of RPC, so that you know, if there's a greater demand at RPC West, then doctors who are maybe based at the Grange would sometimes be working in RPC West and so on, because that's one of the whole principles of us having a larger organisation within primary care, was to be able to do that in order to smooth out some of the inconsistencies or the gaps, if that makes sense. But if you forward me if you were to find the article in the actual detail, I can explore in a bit more detail, if you'd like, Mike, about how they came up with that figure.
They quoted 5,896 patients per whole-time equivalent. So, yeah, it was Derby Telegraph. I'll do that. I'll try.
You do that, and then I'll pick it up with Joe Lacey and Peter Scriven to try and come back to you about what the kind of true figure is, if that makes sense, because I don't think that's the true.
I mean, it's a bit alarming. So, but yeah, I thought there would be probably more of an outcry if that had been confirmed, but it was there. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. So I suggest we leave Hal's report there, as well as the finance update. So thanks to both Hal and Berenice for that. And it's time now to welcome Daniel Ratchford. Daniel's from Quality Health, and they're the company that have undertaken our staff survey for us for the last number of years. And he's going to join to support Caroline today in describing to us the results of the staff survey. And we've also got Dennis Kenthrop here because the DSFS have coincided their survey to run at the same time as the trust-wide one. So it'll be an opportunity for you to hear about that too. The only thing I'm going to say by way of prefacing all this is all very old news, because there's this kind of rhythm that goes about when the survey's done, it all goes off nationally. National like to sit and digest it and have a bit of a cogitate about what it all means. Then it's all embargoed and you can't tell anybody anything till probably 6 months after the survey was done, which isn't really ideal. But that's not to say that you know, the information we get isn't very important. And of course, in our case, we augment it with more real-time information as we go along. And the other thing is to say that it's embargoed from everybody for a while, but the board must have had this now for at least 2 months. So you'll be pleased to know that action planning is well underway, rather than us sitting with us all hearing this for the first time, wondering what to do next. But I didn't want you thinking, well, you know, that's a long time ago, because there is no discourtesy intended towards the Council of Governors. And as you know, we always bring you into our thinking, you know, at the earliest opportunity. But we're under that many restrictions and guidance and advice and what have you. That's just the situation which we happen to find ourselves. So if you've been looking at the paperwork and thinking, that's a little bit of context for you around all of that. So with that note about the chronology of events, can I pass to you, Caroline, please?
Of course, thank you, Helen. That was extremely useful. And hello, it's a pleasure to meet everybody I haven't met before. And Hal, thank you for your very kind words of introduction. I'm just going to give you a really brief overview of the staff survey results, for which I was not in the Trust or the NHS, so I'm really reflecting other people's work in this area. I hope you're all aware that staff engagement is a key priority for everybody within the Trust, and our staff survey results really are one of the key metrics by which we understand how our colleagues feel about working in the hospital. As Helen said, the national embargo was lifted at the end of March, which is a couple of months later than normal, and these results have already been shared with the board and our divisions. Staff survey results this year are a little bit different. They're aligned to the new 7 elements of the NHS People Promise, with 2 additional measures, morale and staff engagement. Our results as a trust are above the national average in every element of the People Promise for the first time, and we actually equal the best nationally in the always learning theme. Our response rate of 61% is also significantly higher than the average of 46% in the acute sector. But despite these overall, positive results, in about 30% of the questions, our results had dropped slightly compared to the previous year. But this again reflects a national trend. And it also reflects the operational strains and stresses of the last year and throughout the pandemic. So our ambition really for this year is to regain on that slight reduction. The results have been shared with the divisions and corporate areas, and they're currently sharing those with their teams and their colleagues to identify good practice, areas to improve. And at the People Committee in July, we'll present our updated staff engagement paper. We propose to continue focusing on 2 key themes, which is health and wellbeing and values and behaviours. But we'd also like to include the theme of inclusion, reflecting the increased priority that we're placing on this within the Trust in terms of understanding our colleagues' experience. I'll pause there. If there are any questions for me specifically about the Trust's results, I can take them now. If not, I'll hand over to Dennis to do an overview of DFSS's. Margaret.
Hi. This is really a question that's been put to me by one of our governors who can't attend today, Fiona Wilson, who has said she's obviously thanked us for the results of the survey, but she had a particular concern, and I accept what Helen said, that you've done a lot of planning already, so you've probably got this in mind, and you've touched on it briefly. But she said she was particularly concerned about some inequalities that there appear to be in terms of the ageing workforce continuing to attend work even when they may not really, feel like being at work, and the BAME groups more exposure to bullying. So she said, in a nutshell, her query is, what action does the Trust have to address inequalities around age and BAME experiences? So I felt I should pose that on Fiona's behalf.
Okay, and thank you for that question, Margaret. If I could address the second point first, with regard to the lived experience of our...
Caroline, can I make a suggestion?
Of course, yeah.
If there are any other questions, let's by all means take them. Can you maybe hold them to one side, and then we'll hear from Dennis, and then we'll hear from Daniel, because I just wonder if for some colleagues some of the questions would make more sense after the richness of the presentation. So that's a really important one Margaret raises on Fiona's behalf. If there's any others, by all means, Caroline will take a note of them now. Frank?
Yes, Caroline. Of the amount of 39% that didn't return the survey, is there any analysis of particular areas or groups of staff that didn't return them? Any analysis of that sort of information?
Do you know, that's a really good question,
We'll
and I actually
hold on
don't.
to that one too, please, Caroline,
Yes.
if you'd be kind enough. Yeah. Very good. Thank you for that one, Frank. Anyone else got any questions straight off that they want to? No. Okay. Very good. In which case, will we pass the baton, Caroline, to Dennis? Yeah. Thank you very much. All yours, Dennis.
Okay. Thank you, Helen, and thanks, Caroline. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dennis Kentrop. For the people that don't know me, I'm the Managing Director for DSFS. Thanks for the opportunity to share our people survey results with you, 2021. We, just for the record, I think it's important that we use the same partner and provider as the Trust does, and our survey is in the similar ilk of the Trust, taken at the same period as well. So that is a quality health that we are working with. Our comparator group, however, is very small. There is one other wholly owned subsidiary and a couple of other private companies that we are using as our comparator group. So just for information before we start. What I would like to do briefly, if I can, is first talk about the results, then some key messages, and then a bit about our action to feedback or feedback to action process, the chat box section. So if I start with the results, Nicola, can I ask you to pop up the scorecard, please?
You will see that, okay.
Yes. What we use in DSFS to communicate our results to stakeholders and our staff groups is a so-called scorecard. And that identifies a couple of key bits of information, which I want to go through with you at the moment. First of all, I would like to say that we are very, very pleased with an increasing response rate in 2021. We had a response rate of 70% this year, which is amazing given the situation that we are working under in 2021, as Caroline already highlighted. So 70% response rate, if at all, another indication of staff engagement, I would have thought. The staff engagement is one of the 5 teams we decided to monitor within DSFS. They are staff engagement, equality, diversity and inclusion, health and well-being, immediate manager, and morale. So if I go to the overall DSFS scorecard, by the way, we have 16 of those scorecards, one for each department, all broken down in the same way, but for people to digest and work with. The first thing to say is that the staff engagement is made up of 3 elements: advocacy, motivation and involvement. And unfortunately, on all those elements, we saw a slight reduction this year. And that is not unsurprising, as Caroline already indicated, given the pressures that people are under. However, there is no statistically significant difference between this year and last year. So that is encouraging. Although we saw a slight dip, it's not statistically significant. And that means that there is some movement, but not to the extent that we have to really concern us immediately at this moment in time. Of course, we concern ourselves with the feedback. That is no question there. But another element of staff engagement, quickly, what I would like to highlight is that we have decided to pick one element out of staff engagement metrics, which is called the Employee Net Promoter Score, as a single metric to have a snapshot of staff engagement, which is a number. And that is based on one question in the survey, and that is question 21C, asking people, would you recommend DSFS as a place to work? And that is for me a very important indicator whether people are happy or not, and that is why we are measuring it. That is supposed to be positive, so that means that there are more people saying positive things than negative things about DSFS. And although we made improvements from the start in 2019, we have fallen a bit back compared to last year. However, some of the elements are a mixed bag because, as I said, there are variances within each department, and we are also looking at a response rate. So in the whole, I think the staff engagement is still on a positive trend, but slightly reduced. On the other metrics, we also saw a slight reduction compared to last year, but as I said before, not significantly different compared to last year and not significantly different compared to our comparator group. And that is also important. So we are not an outlier in that sense. So all in all, a very difficult year. We are very pleased with the extremely high response rate, but we have got some work to do. Then 2 other bits of information I would like to share. The top and bottom questions do highlight what really are the answers to certain questions. So if we have in the top responses, we saw that we were doing very well on equality, diversity and inclusion, and health and well-being, which is really positive. On the bottom questions, that are questions where there are concerns, people highlight that they are not having a good feeling about certain questions, like for instance appraisals. People are not getting appraised to the rate that we would like to see. Therefore, they have not engaged with their line manager about development and concerns they have. So appraisal is one of the bottom questions that we are focusing on. So is involvement of people in decisions. I mean, the bit of context that might be useful is the fact that we had to be a bit more directive in such an emergency situation operationally. That might be part of the reflection in the response. And we have feedback and communication. And one nuance there, the feedback is not that we are not giving feedback, but people don't recognize it as feedback on basis of what they told us. So when we ask them, when we get feedback and we provide it back, we don't link it necessarily to a question they asked. We come back in more general terms. So it's a learning for us to improve on that. Finally, the chat box process. That's really our action plan. So as Helen and Caroline indicated, although the results were in late, we have shared it in our board, we've shared it with Trust Board, and we've shared it with our teams. And they are well on the way with the chat box process. And that's a real process where every member of staff is being asked to come up with a priority of actions they want to deal with in the coming year. They also take ownership of that. So they decide what they would like to work on and they take ownership. And through our regular meeting platforms, they update on progress on those actions. So that is a chat box process. It's a bit structured, but it does work very well and it's well received. So that is what I would like to share with you. I pause here and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dennis. I hope everyone's comfortably back on the call. I'm sorry for the outages. It's kind of strange to find yourself expelled, so to speak, but I think we caught most of, if not quite all of what you were saying, Dennis. Now, in the same vein, is anybody want to kind of mark Dennis's card about things you'll want him to attend to when we get to discussion? Okay, in which case, let's go straight across to Daniel and then we'll have a conversation in the round.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. And just to say, I was one of the people who got kicked out of the call, so fingers crossed it doesn't happen again when I'm presenting. Let me share my slides. Okay. Are those slides visible yet?
Yes, they are now.
Good, good. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you this afternoon. As Helen said, I'm going to present to you the highlights of last year's staff survey. This was a survey that was carried out between September and December 2021. So the results are quite old, but I think still relevant, and there's some really interesting messages and trends in these results. A bit of background to me and Quality Health, which is my business. We are a survey business. We're based very close to you in Homewood, in Chesterfield. We work for a lot of NHS trusts on staff surveys, about 140 last year, and also carry out patient surveys and lots of other market research around healthcare. So we do work around the whole of the NHS. One thing I'd say before I get into the content of the presentation, we run these staff surveys for a lot of different organisations. It's very, very rare that we're asked to present at Trust Board. We've been doing this for the last few years at Chesterfield, which is fantastic. Lots of organisations just ask us for a report, or they'll ask us to report to the HR or the OD team. Very few ask us to report at Trust Board. We're never asked to present at Council of Governors. So I think that in itself is an indication of quite how seriously staff survey is taken in Chesterfield, and it's fantastic that it's discussed at this level. Let me move my slide on. Okay, so very quickly, the methodology for the survey, as I said, it's carried out between September and December every year. There's a mixed methodology, so some people answer on paper, some people answer online. We also have a telephone helpline where people can give their responses over the phone. The survey is designed nationally, and there's quite a complicated methodology in terms of the sampling of staff and how many staff are included in the survey. The intention of that is to ensure that there is really good statistical comparability between different NHS organisations, so that we can compare your performance with other people, but also so that there's good statistical comparability over time, so that we can see how survey results are moving from one year to the next. As I said, we worked with 140 organisations last year. 68 of those are similar to you, acute or acute and community trusts, so it's just over half, and it's that group of 68 that I'll compare your results with today. Starting with the response rate, and you've heard these figures already, but the response rate for your trust last year was just over 61%. The equivalent average across the NHS is just under 45%. So you're getting a significantly better response rate than other people. So these results are based on responses from 2,450 of your staff. That 61% response rate is a big improvement on last year's, where you had 55, which was already above the national average. So you're doing really well in persuading staff to fill in these questionnaires. And the remarks at the bottom of the slide, this is based on 15 years or so that we've been running this survey and other staff surveys. These are the things we see in organisations with really good response rates. The response rates and the responses of the survey are communicated back to staff, and the results of the survey, but also, most importantly, there's response and action from senior management. So when staff see that the results are being looked at and communicated and acted upon, that's when people will respond in greater numbers the following year. So this is a really good start, and the fact that 61% of staff want to spend some time filling in a questionnaire about their experience of working with the trust is a really good sign in itself of positive engagement. So that's how many people responded. You heard that there are now 7 different people promises and a couple of themes that the questions are organised into. There are about 100 questions in the questionnaire, and they're organised into 9 different themes. This slide normally has a combination of different colours on it. In your case, all 9 of those themes you score significantly better than the sector, which is why this is coloured entirely green. I've never presented one of these to any of our other clients where it's entirely green before. So a fantastic start on this first slide of scores. In terms of the questions, so they were the 9 themes. These are there are actually 99 questions in the survey, and as you can see here, on most of those questions you score significantly better than the sector. 87% of the questions. There are 3 questions where you're significantly worse than the sector, so it's a very tiny amount, and then 10 where you're about the same. And I'll show you some of these questions as we go through. I'm not going to talk to all 99 of them, but I'll show you some headlines. So that's how you compare to the rest of the sector. This slide shows how you compare with your results in 2020. So this is the change in a single year. And as you can see, this is quite a different picture. So on 6 of those questions, 10% of them, you scored significantly better in 2021 than you did in 2020. On about a third of them, 19 questions, you were significantly worse than the year before. And about 2/3 of questions are roughly the same as they were before. So this really is the theme of your results this year. There are quite a few questions where you've got significantly worse, which is the picture we see across the whole of the sector. But compared to the rest of the sector, you're doing really, really well. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to go very quickly through the 9 different themes and just show you a couple of the questions in each of them, which I think are particularly interesting. The other bit of background, of course, which you're all very aware of, is that this survey was undertaken during a time when the COVID-19 pandemic was ongoing, and obviously that was a huge focus for staff and made huge differences to the way they worked. So these are some of the figures that just represent how different life was for staff during 2021. 47% of staff working on a COVID specific ward, 26% being redeployed, 29% having to work remotely because of the pandemic. So a time when working conditions were very, very different for people, which is some of the context behind why the scores got worse in many areas. Scores themselves, the first of those 9 themes then, staff engagement, and these are the 3 most important questions around staff engagement. And you can see here the theme I've talked about, which is that between 2020 and 2021, the scores got significantly worse for these questions. So the red boxes, but comparing your 2021 score with the average score in the sector, you're significantly better, which is the green boxes. So these are probably the most important questions in the overall survey. They're certainly the ones that NHS England and the Care Quality Commission are most interested in. So 80% of your staff say that care of patients and service users is the organisation's top priority, which is fantastic. 70% of staff say they would recommend Chesterfield as a place to work. 74% say that if a friend or relative needed treatment, they'd be happy with the standard of care provided. So all of those significantly better than the sector, but they've all got worse since 2020. So that's the first of the 9 themes. The second is around morale, and you can see from the colours on the slide exactly the same theme here, significant decline since 2020, but you're significantly better than the rest of the sector. And just to pick up on the top 3 of these, which are about people's happiness with their employment, 25% of staff are saying they often think about leaving the trust. 18% say they'll probably look for a new job somewhere else in the next 12 months. 12% say as soon as they find another job, they'll leave the organisation. So although these figures are significantly better than the sector, they're still figures of some concern in any organisation. So that's a bit about morale. The third theme is we are always learning. These are all new questions in this year's survey, so there's no comparison with the previous year. And as you can see by the green bars down the right-hand side, significantly better on all of these than the scores in the sector. And just to pick up a couple of these, 74% of staff saying the organisation offers them challenging work, 74% saying they have opportunities to improve their knowledge and skills. So again, really positive results on this theme. Fourth theme, we work flexibly. Again, very few comparisons with 2020 because there are new questions, but in all of these areas, again, you're significantly better than the sector. And the flexible working ones I think are interesting given what was happening with COVID in 2021. 52% of staff are still saying, despite that the organisation is committed to helping them balance work and home life. 58% they can achieve a good balance between work and home life. 74% say that they're happy to approach their managers to talk about flexible working. So again, some positive scores in this area. The fifth theme is about working as a team. Again, the same theme here. Most of these are significantly better than they were the year before. Some of them really, significantly better than the sector. Some of them really high scores. So 87% of staff saying they enjoy working with the colleagues in their team, which is fantastic in any organisation. And then the second set of questions, again in this same theme around we are a team. These are all about managers, and I think this is a particularly important set of scores. These are all questions where staff are asked to give views on their managers. So 76% saying their immediate manager encourages them at work, 69% their manager gives them clear feedback, 74% their manager takes a positive interest in their health and well-being. So it's a really positive set of scores around managers, and you'll see a bit later on there's some more that echo this again. The sixth theme is about staff having a voice that counts. And again, similar theme here, that there hasn't been a change between 2020 and 2021, but these are all of them significantly better than the sector. And again, I'll just pick out a couple of the really big numbers here. 90% of staff saying they always know what their work responsibilities are, and 92%, I think this one's really good, 92% saying they're trusted to do their job, which is a great sign of organisational health. So there's some of the questions about having a voice that counts. Another set here, and I'm sharing this because this is a particularly interesting set of questions. I think the first two, I know from having done this presentation in previous years that this is an area the Trust has been concerned about and has done lots of work to improve. And it's great to see that 82% of staff now say they feel secure raising concerns about unsafe clinical practice. 68% say if they do raise those concerns, they're confident the organisation will do something to address them. So they've made significant improvements. I mean, really big numbers, 5-6% jump from one year to the next, and they're significantly better than the sector. The next question is less good. So staff saying they feel safe to speak up about anything that concerns them in the organisation has dropped from 75% to 71%. It's still a lot better than the rest of the sector, but I think interesting because it's at odds with the first question on this slide, which is about feeling secure raising concerns about unsafe clinical practice. So staff are saying they're happy to raise concerns about clinical practice, but less happy to raise concerns about other things, and we'll come back to that in a couple of slides' time. The seventh theme, we are compassionate and inclusive, and this is another set of questions which is all about people's immediate managers, and again really positive scores. No comparison with 2020, but these are all significantly better than the rest of the sector. 73% of staff saying their immediate manager worked with them to come to an understanding of problems. 76% saying their immediate manager is interested in listening when they talk about challenges that they face. So it's again some great scores on this theme. And then another set of scores, these relate to diversity and equality. So these pick up some of the questions that were asked before the presentation. These scores are good and they're significantly better than the sector, but they're not fantastic, would be sort of my comment. So 66% of staff are saying the organisation acts fairly with regards to career progression or promotion, regardless of ethnic background, gender, religion, sexual orientation, disability or age. 66% say yes to that question, which is lots better than the sector on 55%, but it still means there's 34% of your staff who aren't saying that, which is the area I think to focus on. The next two questions are about staff personally experiencing discrimination at work. The first question is from patients or service users. The second question from their manager or team leader. In both cases, 5% of staff are saying that they have personally experienced discrimination. It's better than the sector, but 5% is still quite a high figure. 1 in 20 staff saying they've personally experienced discrimination. So some interesting figures on that slide to have a look at. The 8th theme is about feeling recognised and rewarded. Again, looking at the right-hand column, these are all significantly better than the sector, but some of these have got significantly worse over the last year. And I think these are worth focusing on as well. So 59% of staff are saying they get recognition for good work, has dropped from 63%. 49% say they're recognised and rewarded by the organisation in terms of valuing their work. That's dropped from 55%. And 35% are saying they're satisfied with their level of pay. It was 39% last year, but 35 is a fairly low figure in any survey question. So again, some areas to focus on here. The bottom question here, another question about immediate managers, and is another really high one. 77% saying their immediate manager values their work. And the final theme number 9, we are safe and healthy. Again, most of these are significantly better than the sector, but also some quite low numbers here. So 37% of staff saying that they sometimes find work emotionally exhausting. 33% say they feel burnt out because of work. 38% say that work frustrates them. So some concerning figures, and perhaps not surprising given what's been happening around COVID, but it gives you a real sense of the stress and strain that's placed on staff in any healthcare environment at the moment. Again, under this same theme, safe and healthy. And finally, I'm nearly at the end of the presentation, finally you can see one of those red blocks on the right hand side. So this is one of those 3 questions where you're significantly worse than the sector. This is about reporting violence at work. So you remember a couple of slides back, I talked about reporting unsafe clinical practice, and people said they were happy to do that and thought the organisation would do something about it. In this case, if staff experience physical violence at work, only 59% of them are saying that they're happy to report it, which is a tiny bit less than it was last year, but is quite a lot worse than the sector. So that's the interesting number on that slide. To sort of complete that theme, you'll see here another question where you're significantly worse than the sector. This again is about physical violence, and this is about the level of physical violence. So the question is asking, how many times have you personally experienced violence at work from patients or service users or members of the public? 18% of your staff are saying they've personally experienced it, which is a lot worse than the 14% on average in the sector. So 18% are experiencing it, and quite a lot of people, when they do experience it, aren't reporting it. So you're not seeing that in your systems. You see some other questions on here, and I won't go through all of them, which are about work-related stress, people coming to work even though they don't feel well enough to do so. On all of those questions, you're better than the sector, but there's still areas you ought to be concerned about because they're high numbers. 44% of people saying that they've experienced work-related stress, for example. So that's a very quick run through of the 9 themes, and I've shared with you a few of the questions just to give you a flavour. To summarise all of that, they're really positive results. On most questions, you have better responses than the rest of the sector, so you should be really pleased with these. But the results need to be understood in the overall context of what was happening at the time around COVID. So a lot of scores have got worse, and it's not surprising given the stresses and strains in the system. Comparisons with the sector are excellent. Some particular areas jump out at me as being really important and certainly to be celebrated. So raising concerns around clinical practice, big improvements there. Issues around managers, staff being very satisfied with the interaction they have with their managers. And I didn't pick this up on the way through the slides, but some really positive improvements around harassment, bullying and abuse from other colleagues in the organisation, very, very low levels, and people happy in most cases to report that. 30% of questions have deteriorated over the last year, which is perhaps not surprising. The final bullet, so this is the 2 red boxes in terms of comparisons with the rest of the sector, were both around physical violence, about the level of physical violence that staff experience from patients, and about the happiness staff feel in reporting that. So that's a quick summary. The right-hand side is some of the key indicators in terms of the questions I think are most important in this survey. They're all coloured green in the writing because they're all significantly better than the rest of the sector. The number in brackets in red shows that they've actually all dropped significantly over the last year. So that's really the flavour of the overall survey. I will stop at that point and stop share. Hoping everybody's.
The force, Daniel. That was fabulous. Thank you so much. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. So before I come to Gervais, I'd like to go back, if I may, please, to Caroline to give her an opportunity to answer the question raised by Margaret on Fiona's behalf and also the one Frank raised, and then we'll come back to Gervais.
Thank you, Helen. Margaret, to go to your question first. You asked about inequalities for an ageing workforce and also regarding racial inequality as well. I think an ageing workforce is something that we're seeing nationally. I don't think it's germane to our trust. Indeed, there is a national emphasis on the policy of retire and return, so giving colleagues as they approach retirement age the opportunity to return on a sort of flexible contract that may help them through the transition into retirement. There's also an increasing emphasis on women's health. There's a lot more focus on things like menopause and supporting people as they reach that sort of age. But it's not something that I've done a specific piece of work on since I've been here. So I'd like to take that away and perhaps come back to you at a later date with a more comprehensive answer. With regard to bullying and harassment and our BME colleagues, this is something that the Trust have placed an increasing emphasis on in the last 12 to 18 months. And very recently, we've seen increasing commitment from the execs and HLT to supporting work in this area. We're talking at exec level about an anti-racism strategy and very clearly setting out a zero tolerance towards racism. There's some cultural intelligence work going on as a system, which is about opportunities for initially line managers and those within the leadership assembly to be more aware of different cultures, different backgrounds, just the diversity of people within our workforce. So you don't necessarily see people's lives through your own lived experience. And we've got 2 new co-chairs of our BME staff network who are very motivated and very engaged. So our BME staff network is about to be, it's under consultation at the moment with colleagues about being renamed and rebranded. And we had a meeting with them on Monday, actually, to talk about co-creating an action plan to tackle racial inequality within the Trust. So I hope that gives you a little bit of reassurance that it is certainly the racial aspect of bullying and harassment is on our radar and is something that we are intending to tackle. With regard to the second question from Frank, which was about why 39% of our colleagues didn't complete the survey, I'm afraid I don't have a good answer to that question at the moment, and it's perhaps something I could go back to Daniel with, and we could talk about getting a better breakdown of areas within the Trust that people didn't respond and our response rates, and we could actually take some more proactive staff engagement this year to try to tackle whether that's particular themes or particular areas and wards and departments that don't have such a high engagement rate. Daniel, I don't know if there's anything you could jump in at that point. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. We certainly have all of those facts and figures, so we can do a breakdown across different areas in the Trust, but also different staff groups and different levels, different management levels as well. I haven't got that to hand, but I'm pretty sure, given our experience in other trusts over the years, that it's likely to be that the staff who are office-based and managerial staff are much more likely to fill in the questionnaires, and the groups who are typically underrepresented in the results are frontline staff. So it'll be nursing staff and other clinical staff who are less well represented in those results than other groups. And I know the Trust has done a lot of work over the years in trying to target those groups and bring up the response rates. Your response rates across all groups are better than virtually every other Trust that we work with. It doesn't mean there's not more work that could be done, but they're really good figures.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, both. Gervais, please.
Has there been more work done to identify people who are being discriminated at work? Are there usual groups of people who get recognized by every survey of this kind? And second thing is, are the people who are being discriminated the same group of people who are being threatened with verbal or physical violence at work?
Thank you for that question, Pervez. So to answer your first question, what we have some quite interesting qualitative evidence through channels like the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, through our EDI coordinator, which gives us kind of glimpses of individual staff experiences on wards and departments. But I don't think we have a truly comprehensive picture, and I don't think it is. So we know there are certain areas, wards, departments, teams where there are greater challenges than the others, but I don't think there's anything that there isn't a specific staff group that has greater problems than others in that regard. With regard to the physical violence, that's something that was a trust priority following on from the staff survey results last year. And there's some work going on in the safeguarding team to look at clinical holding and rolling out clinical holding training across the trust, particularly in those areas where there are more frail and dementia type patients, to help colleagues better respond, which we hope will then make them more confident to report those kind of incidents. But again, I think these are, again, as a result of things like the pandemic, some of the training we perhaps would have wanted to roll out over the last year, we've had to restrict some of the amount of mandatory training, etc., just because of operational pressures. So I think it's something that we need to look forward to delivering more on in the next 12 months and onwards.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Frank's point, really, just to about the people who aren't responding to the survey, Frank. We have to remember, of course, that this is just one part of the process, and during the year, the teams and we put in plans to take these results back and discuss them with all the teams. So that involves all the people who didn't respond as well. So those people's views are captured at that point. And as we go forward, we should see improvements in that regard.
A good point, Kevin, thank you. And maybe last word on this item to Hal, please.
It was just to add something about the physical violence to sort of clarify, if you'd like, that whilst there are some acts of physical violence in areas like ED from the public, the majority of episodes of physical violence are to do with patients who are often confused or with dementia. So it's just to point that out to people that often it's due to sort of illness, if you'd like, for the patient, rather than what you might initially think of as being physical violence. So when we look at the incidents that are reported there, the majority of cases, rather than, you know, for the sake of argument, a drunk coming off the street and hitting someone in ED, that's actually very much the minority of cases.
Thanks, Hal. I see you want to come in, Norman. Definitely the last word to Norman.
Yeah, just to update, the criminal law has recently changed in offences against emergency service workers, and the sentence has increased from 1 year up to 2 years maximum. Oh, sorry, minimum. So that there is some protection there from the courts and from the law for people working in emergency services. So that to me is good news.
It is indeed, and it reflects the seriousness with which these matters should be taken, really. Yeah, so thanks for that update, Norman. I suggest we draw a line there. A big thank you to Daniel and to Dennis and to Caroline. And it was lovely to hear, Daniel, you say that we're the only people who share this at board and council governors. I mean, it strikes me as a no-brainer. You know, why wouldn't you want all this richness of information to kind of go at collectively? But having said that, you'll probably keep getting invited back because you do it so well. So thank you not only for the quality of the survey, but the way in which you bring it to life for us. And I very much hope when you come back this time next year that the ground we lost between 20 and 21 will have been recouped, and indeed that we will have gone above and beyond, because as we said when we discussed this as a board, you know, we've still got the kind of soil under our nails from having taken the trust where it was in 2016 to where it is today. It has been a very long, hard-won journey. And it's like, you know, sorry to keep on with the analogy, but you can go from the top of the mountain to the bottom on your bottom in a matter of minutes. And we just need to make sure that we don't lose any ground and that we push on. And I know we're all committed to doing that, and it might be statement to the obvious, but, you know, without happy staff, there can be no happy patients, there can be no great efficiencies, there can be no service redesign. You know, it's at the heart of everything. If there's only one thing as a board and a council of governors we could do, it is to make sure that our staff are happy, who in turn have patients and clinical outcomes and well-being and experience in their hands. And we are here to serve them in that endeavour. And there are some, despite the wonderfulness of the results, there are some areas of real and deep concern there to me and to the board. And just be assured that we are on with them. Jane, I know you're doing Sue's success measures report on her behalf. But can I just ask, are you also doing FTSE, or are we waiting until Sue comes back?
I've got a brief from Helen, quite a comprehensive brief.
Good woman, do go for it.
Okay. So my apologies, folks, if this is a little stilted. I just need to work my way through the brief because I think it's really important. Sue has covered quite a lot in this, and she's also it's tied quite nicely to the staff survey and the topic that we've just been discussing. So firstly, Abby has provided the half-yearly Freedom to Speak Up report to board in May with a summary of the trust data for October 2021 to March 2022. And some of you will know that that will have been Abby's last report to the board as she's left the role, but not happily the trust. And so we're very pleased that we've now appointed a new Freedom to Speak Up guardian, and that's Pansy. And Pansy hasn't yet started, but will be starting very shortly, and will be continuing the good work of Abby. So in terms of speaking up, Sue wanted me to emphasise the really important support that the guardian gets from the trust board and hospital leadership team, and also from the board. She's also wanted me to say what a great legacy that Abby is leaving, and that the culture is really completely transformed in the trust, and I think you will have heard some of that from the staff survey results. Really importantly, one of the things that Abby has focused on is not only about the people that are speaking up, but the people that have been spoken up about. And certainly at Trust Board, we've actually heard from someone who has had experience of that as an actual staff story. And she's also been working very closely with the executive team on the priority areas. So the teams that we identify that we want to give a little bit of extra support through the year. So you can see there's a bit of a joined up approach there between the executives and also Freedom to Speak Up. In terms of measurable evidence of Abby's great work, the things that Sue wanted me to highlight were the new NHS staff survey theme, We All Have a Voice That Counts, is above the national average score for the hospital and also for Royal Primary Care. The 4 speaking up questions in the survey all have scores above the national average. 1 question is new, 2 others demonstrate a continually improving score, which indicates an improving speaking up culture at Chesterfield Royal. And again, you heard some of that from Daniel. 1 question has seen a decrease in positive responses, and although this is consistent with the national picture, it highlights that there are still challenges and that we're continuing to make organisational efforts to improve our speaking up culture. The number of cases raised with the Guardian has fallen for the 2nd consecutive time period, and you'll know that Chesterfield had a very high level of speaking up when you look across at our colleagues nationally as well. And so we're going to keep an eye on that, and also with Pansy's support we're going to look at any barriers to speaking up. In terms of the alignment of Chesterfield Royal with the national picture, the National Guardian's Office category of cases involving bullying and harassment has more cases than the category of patient safety and quality, and nurses continue to be the largest staff group speaking up. all of which is in line with national data shared in the National Guardian's Office Annual Data Report. So that's the difference between the types of cases that are being reported. Communication attitudes, behaviours and potential leadership issues remain a key element in many speaking up cases, as again per the national picture. So in terms of us keeping up awareness and the learning, the National Guardian's Office e-learning package continues to be accessed. The rollout of Freedom to Speak Up training for managers is well underway, and the next steps include continuing to work collaboratively to provide support to all those involved in the speaking up process, with support from peers and networks as well as colleagues in the Trust. And the Freedom to Speak Up policy will be relaunched once it's finalised. And then in summary, Sue wanted you to know, we know from this and previous reports that some areas of the Trust, such as DSFS and RPC, might need more focused attention to make sure all staff in Chesterfield feel equally able to speak up. And you may recall that we increased Freedom to Speak Up hours so that we now have a full-time role, or virtually a full-time role in Freedom to Speak Up. But Sue is flagging up that that may at some point require further investment. So that's Sue's brief as given to me, and I think you can see that kind of tying with the last topic that we discussed.
I'm really pleased to have taken those two together, because that's exactly the way we did it at board. And, you know, reflecting on the fact that people are so happy to speak out about clinical matters, and there isn't the same level of comfort about speaking out about a whole range of matters. I think it's really important that we, you know, that we're attentive to this. So it's helpful to have the report. And thank you for stepping into the breach, Jane. In Sue's absence, Jane and I will do our best to answer any questions colleagues may have. Are there any? Norman.
Just a quick question, really. If a member of staff reports bullying or physical violence, who investigates that? Do we do that internally, or do we have external investigators?
I wonder, Berenice, if you'd like to kind of come in, because
I could talk to that quickly if you want there. So it depends on the nature and who's raising it, Norman. So we'd take a view with the staff member at what would be appropriate, and most of the time it's investigated internally, but there have been examples of where we've had some external help with that as well.
Anyone else on Freedom to Speak Up? No. Okay, very good. In which case, thank you very much, Jane. And we're on to the success measures report. And in time-honoured tradition, we're just going to go through with lead Ned's speaking to the relevant part of the report. And if my screen hadn't frozen, we would, very good. So, Jane, I think you're first up again, if that's all right, and we'll take it from there.
I think, Helen, I'm also stepping in again for Sue if she's not back, and also for Keith.
You're first and last.
So, but in terms of my own success measure, we had the presentation at the last Council of Governors showing that the Achieving Care Excellence programme had been temporarily stood down because of COVID pressures. And I think I've just updated you today just to remind you of the position of where the ward positions are, and the fact that we actually intend to resume the programme this month. The one thing I did want to say was really about that digital platform, though, for bringing all the intelligence together, because I think it's really important, and that's really going to help us in having that proper read across for all of our measures that feed into not only the accreditation process, but also when we're looking also across the board at the quality of services area by area. So that's the only update from me today. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks very much, Jane. I think you might be saved by the bell. I think Sue's just dialed back in. If we can go to, we don't have, do we have Jeremy? I don't think we have Jeremy, but apologies from Jeremy, haven't we? Jeremy's still walking in the Black Forest eating gatter.
He is, yeah, he's not back yet.
Very good.
Helen, if I might say, he's not raised anything with me to raise other than what's in the report.
Okay. Can I just check in Jeremy's absence, with Atul, with his role on the People Committee, if there's anything, Atul, you want to add to Jeremy's report, or if you're happy for it just to be noted?
Just a couple of things. Thank you, Helen. We've been talking earlier on in the context of the staff survey about some EDI issues, and I've been sort of picked upon as the EDI champion. So you'll be hearing from me. I'll be interacting more with the BME staff networks and so on about that. And I think Caroline mentioned that we've got some new co-chairs of that network who I'll be meeting with next week. One of the areas I have to say that has been flagged up, and we did touch on in the People Committee, last People Committee, was that about the target for BME staff in leadership roles. We had a target of about 7.9%, and I think our achievement is about half of that. So that's another area that we're sort of pooling into the kind of overall work that Caroline's talked about earlier. So those were the only couple of additions to the report that Jeremy's put before you. Thank you.
Helpful additions. Thank you, Atul. Let's go to Nora, if we may, please. Nora.
Thank you. I'm looking at, or we attached a copy of the place-based working report, and I think that's a really good snapshot of the way that people are working together to keep people well and at home. And there's probably 4 just areas that I would probably highlight that I think show real progress in terms of a joined up approach to not only treating ill health but preventing it and improving the physical and well-being, mental well-being of the communities that we look after. Team Up Derbyshire, I think, sorry, there's a bit of an echo there. Team Up Derbyshire, I think the work that the primary care networks are doing to develop their home visiting services, I think that is a real positive. Home visiting offers, they have a multidisciplinary team approach for supporting those who are housebound. So the benefits are that the home visiting team is able to spend more time, spend longer with the individual, and in particular link other services, including the voluntary services, into the person. So that offers more support and enables a much more holistic approach to the whole thing. It's receiving very good feedback from what I can see. 98% of the people that were asked would recommend that service to family and friends. So I think that, off to a good start. I think the Living Well mental health initiative is preparing for the next wave, of which Chesterfield is in that next wave. They're working with an innovation unit, which is a social enterprise, experts in service redesign. So again, looking at encouraging a collective effort to support new ways of delivering adult mental health services. And the timeline is to have this delivered across the region by 2023. So good progress there. And I think in terms of the prevention agenda, good to see that data is being used across the piece, both in terms of building programmes for weight management and for physical activity. So I think that that's a real positive in moving forward on that. And the other part that I thought I would just flag was that some of the steps that are being taken on dementia care. There's a subgroup which has been formed to focus on specifically on dementia. And again, that's bringing representation from dementia carers, from older adult psychiatry, social prescribers, and the voluntary sector, GPs, and adult other parts of the sector. So I think that again is a positive about a new approach for dementia and not forgetting family and carers at the same time. So I think there's good progress to be able to look at how joined up working is progressing across the piece.
You're on mute, Helen.
Sorry, I was just saying thanks, Nora, and how many interesting insights there are there to kind of just bringing the whole system working thing to life. So thank you for that. We haven't got Keith with us this afternoon. Keith is in Bath. He wasn't looking forward to his 4 hours there and his 4 hours back. But I'm sure that Berenice might be kind enough. Oh no, of course, Berenice has gone to her system call, so she may not be with us either. But this is all about.
Helen, sorry, Helen, I can stand in for Keith.
Very good, well done.
Really, the thing that Keith wanted to note from his report really was the last 2 points, which were about flagging up the financial challenges, so exiting the year and moving into next year. And of course, we've already heard from Berenice on that. But if I may, I want to just pick up the first 3 points, which were about working stably, because I think that's a very good fit if we're thinking about population health and what we as a hospital are doing in terms of our contribution to population health through rural primary care. And then I also wanted to just pick up, there's a comment about family hubs and the importance of that for us in developing our maternity services when we're looking at continuity of carer, which gives much better outcomes for mums and babies. So as a board, we're talking quite a bit about continuity of carer, but it is dependent on where we can base those services. So that comment on family hubs is really important. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Jane. And again, helpful to just have those few bits brought out. And then last but by no means least, Sue, you're back with us. So if we can leave you to number 5 about digital services and beyond.
You can. Thank you very much. So apologies for having to step out for a bit. So, well, again, let's take the report as read, I think, but there's all sorts of things, connections tying up in the conversations that we've been having. So I suppose the first point I wanted to make was just the sheer volume of work that's going on. You'll see some really brilliant examples in the report about the improvement activities, the use of digital to really enable services to really make things better for patients. But also that they seem to be in parallel doing all the other things that we need as a trust. So we're really focusing on patient experience, but things, for example, like the new initiative when you arrive at ED, the streaming tool that allows you to kind of work out whether the patient really needs to come to ED or not. So it helps the patient experience because it might divert them to access to a service that's more appropriate, but it takes the pressure off our ED as well, which is a bit of a double whammy, really. And I think all of the examples in the report, for me, show that we've got that kind of obsession with patient experience, but it's also coupled with the most efficient use of our services at the point of access to the patient. And as you've just heard, you heard earlier from Berenice, and then Jane just referenced it then from Keith's report, the criticality of us getting smarter, more efficient, making best use of what we've got when we are really going to be up against it financially is even more important. So all that constant innovation and improvement work is, it's operating on 2 kind of streams. It's the very focused on patient experience, but also helping the trust. And I'm, as I often say, coming from an environment where we're doing lots of transformation, I'm always humbled by just quite how much transformation the hospital gets through whilst doing all of the stuff that it does from a day-to-day point of view. And also just to point out, I think someone asked at the earlier point before I left about Dr. Link, and some information in the report about that, which will hopefully be helpful. And I think in the report as well, there was a link to looking at the Get You Better, the new musculoskeletal app. So you could have a look at that if you wanted to. And then I think just to call out, watch this space. There'll be more to come next time on digital enablers, as it's a huge priority for all of us. So yeah, I'll stop there, Helen.
That's super. Thanks very much, Sue. Now, that's the way we always handle this. We go all the way through all the reports because governor colleagues might well have questions on individual reports, or it might give you pause for thought in the round in terms of what you've heard about us progressing and the kind of key outcomes. So any comments or thoughts or questions prompted on the back of those reports? Margaret, please.
Thank you, Helen. Mine is a general question about the whole governance measures of success process. Obviously, we've been reporting in the context of the outcomes linked for 21-22. My question really is, are we keeping those same outcomes moving forward 22-23? Has the board discussed changes to the outcomes, or should we actually be amending the parameters that we're reporting against at this point in time?
Great question. Let me take it, and great timing. So the board had a whole day last Wednesday looking at our progress against these measures and our key business plan measures for the year, and thinking about, in order to deliver our strategy, what are the things we're going to need to be focused on, not for the next 12 months, but actually for the next 24 months. So we've got a paper coming back to the July board that will do two things. It will settle on those priorities, and it will also settle on, as a board, what are the key milestones we would want to keep our eye on in terms of having good stewardship of those priorities over the coming couple of years. So I think the answer to your question, Margaret, has to be that we would like to bring that back at that point to nominations, as we have in previous years, for perhaps the nominations committee to have the first consideration of those, with a view to, as we have really helpfully and with your guidance and leadership, actually, Margaret, to the Council of Governors to talk collectively about how it is these might get refreshed. So the answer is we definitely need to do it, and there will be the opportunity to do it imminently. So thank you for that. We probably should have added that under our own steam, but a very helpful question, Margaret, to flush all that out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the report? No, in which case, let us move on to the next item, which is the external audit update, please, Ian.
Thank you very much. Just to introduce myself, for those who don't know, I'm Ian Ailes. I'm one of the non-execs on the board, and I chair the Audit and Risk Committee. So the external audit is something that obviously we do each year. Our external auditors are KPMG, and as those of you who were governors back in January will know, we have recently reappointed them for a further 3 years. So this work that they're doing for us right now is the last of their first 3-year assignment, and then they move on to their second 3-year assignment. So we had an Audit and Risk Committee meeting yesterday, specifically looking at signing off the accounts for the period 21-22, but also looking at where we are proceeding with counter fraud for 21-22, which we also have to sign off, and looking at value for money for 22-23. So we had 3 areas to sign off. They're all linked to effectively the external audit. I think what I would say is that I've got a strong degree of comfort with KPMG. They've managed the process over the last 3 to 4 months with us closely. There's been a very regular communication, not only with the executives, but also with the non-executives. And they have given us insight and challenge with a knowledge of CRH, but also being far enough away to ask questions from a effectively an NHS perspective. KPMG, as you're probably aware, do about 70 other entities in the NHS, so they do give us informal comparisons as to where we are compared to other entities within the NHS. And they also have a close connection with the NHS INE, who provide some of the guidance for this work. So those are the positives. I guess what we've encountered this year is that this year we have had very late notifications from NHS INE around different approaches to the accounts, to the extent that we've actually had to do some rework during the period of the year end. We've had a number of other sort of new directions that come out of NHS Centre where we've had to do new analysis, which has just taken more time and obviously more effort, both from ourselves and also from the auditors. And obviously the other thing is that we're trying to sign off the value for money for 22-23 in June. you'd normally be signing off a value for money 22-23 close to the start of the financial year, back in April and May. So we've had a bit of a confluence of issues come together. So I guess we have encountered sort of what I call a level of late change, a bit of complexity and a bit of almost duplication of requirements. The positive is that we've done a bit more in-depth testing than we have done historically, a bit more analytical review of our numbers. And I guess because we know we're under such scrutiny, it's just, yeah, we've just sort of taken what I would call a stronger kick at the tyres around the financials. As at today, we have signed off the accounts for 21-22 and all of the linked documents. So when you sign accounts, you have to sign a letter of consent, your going concern letter, a number of other documents. So they are signed off. The work is not yet 100% complete. It's due to be submitted to NHS INE on the 22nd of June, but there is no indication that any of the finalising work is anything more than tidying the corners and edges. So we've signed it off. I guess you could argue subject to, but effectively it's signed off numbers, and I'll come on to those numbers in a minute. The other thing that we've signed off yesterday and actually overnight this morning is our counter fraud return, which is part of our effectively our external audit that goes to the NHS Counter Fraud Authority. The good news for CRH is that we have markedly improved our score year on year. So last year we were at amber, where we had 4 or 5 categories that we were not meeting the targets. This year we're meeting all of our targets, so we're green across the board. So that's a big step forward, and there's been a lot of work done in the organisation to get there. The third area that we've also signed off, subject to the operating plan, what Berenice talked about at the start of the meeting, is around the value for money metrics. Now, KPMG, the external auditors, have to comment on what our plans look like for the future year. Now, what they have highlighted is that, as Hal and Berenice at the start of this meeting identified, we still have some real challenges with the financials in 22-23. So at the moment, KPMG is saying that we have no significant weaknesses, which is the most important part, i.e. we're very aware of our position, we're taking all necessary steps, but that we do have one significant risk, and that's around the financial sustainability, actually meeting a break-even level. And in sort of consultation with them, we're probably, compared to a number of trusts across the country, we're in a better position, but there's a view that actually if you haven't got sustainability of the system, it's quite hard for an individual trust within the system to show that they have no risks at all. So that is the current position with VFM. So as I say, we've signed off all those documents. Just to give you a sense as to where we finished for 21-22, we had a deficit of £5.9 million. That compared to last year of £2.6 million, and after taking revaluations of buildings, that deficit fell to a loss of £3.6 million, which compared to £1.5 million last year. So that's our declared, effectively audited financial results for the year that's just closed, the ones that we've just signed off. So hopefully that gives an overview as to where we are with the external audit, and also the role of KPMG working with us on it. Thank you.
That's great update. Thank you very much, Ian. And it will be important in its own right, but of course it's particularly important given the very significant role of the Council of Governors in hiring and firing the external auditors and the purchase that gives them across the trust. So a really important update in that regard as well. Are there any questions of Ian on the back of that report? In which case, may I offer a vote of thanks, Ian. It's an horrendously busy time of year for an Audit and Risk Committee, even if you weren't dealing with a confluence of the outgoing and incoming years and into half past the summer. So we're very grateful for the diligence and tenacity you've shown in getting us through these various stages of the process. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
That brings us on then to the next section of the agenda, learning, improvement and innovation, and item 9, which is the Royal Academy of Improvement Annual Report. Berenice.
Thanks, Helen. So earlier I was Steve Heppenstall. I'm now going to become John Court for a little while, so apologies everybody. John's done us a few highlights just to share with you, but obviously I'll take that everybody's read this excellent report. It is presented in a really easy, readable way, isn't it? It's quite fun to work through. So the things that John wanted us to highlight for you was that obviously during the last year, COVID and operational pressures has meant that the Academy had to definitely work in a very different way. And I will try not to repeat what Sue's updated because she's given a good overview. A lot of requirements coming in, different changes from NHSEI. So they became really good at supporting and offering to all the teams across the trust care and support on the wards, opportunities for our patients, and certainly supporting staff to remain safe. But they also continued with some of the improvement work, implement virtual outpatients through the use of video. And you've seen from some of the results that's come across the whole country that we're actually pretty outstanding when it comes to our virtual use of outpatients. Implementing patient-initiated follow-up, which I just think that's fantastic. Being a person who's had a son with Crohn's disease all his life, if I'd had patient-initiated follow-up back in the days where I sat most of the day waiting to go into different appointments when I knew he was absolutely fine at that time, it would have been brilliant. So we've been instrumental in leading the way on some of that work. And then the changes with outpatients service has had a really positive environmental impact too, reducing 2 million miles of travel, 46,000 fewer car parking space being used on site, and 403 tonnes of CO2 emissions. So really starting to contribute to our green plan, and it's brilliant to be able to evidence that. We also know that since the pandemic, patient behaviours and referrals into secondary care has changed, which has meant we've had to make other improvements to pathways. Sue mentioned earlier on about the streaming and redirection tool. It's gone down really well, the algorithm, and people are adopting that tool. There's the implementation of the community breast pain clinic, which takes women with breast pain into a clinic that isn't 2-week cancer, a 2-week wait cancer. And again, that has a positive impact on your experience that you have, and it's gone down really well, been well received. And the other one just to mention is the support that the frailty team have had to develop their acute care pathways. And that again, we've now got dashboards that can evidence the improvements and really reduce the length of stay. So again, improved experience. 2 other points that John just wanted us to mention. One was around the CUSA training. So that's the improvement methodology that we use in the organisation, and it's basically a toolbox of improvement tools. And that has, despite the challenges faced by our clinical and operation colleagues, they have continued to deliver those courses. And we just saw on Monday, we had our improvement delivery group. There was 12 improvement ideas that have been brought forward by the staff who've been through CUSA training, and they've actually transacted those and translated those into transformation pieces of work. Quite small projects, but again, it's really helped with that patient care. So that's fantastic that they've kept that going. And the final point is just around, we've led across the Derbyshire system in implementing the electronic PMO. So that allows us to track every single one of our transformation projects, and helps us put in the milestones. And when it comes to the issues that we highlighted earlier around the operational plan and ensuring that we are as efficient as possible, both from a monetary and a patient experience point of view, to, that we actually track those benefits along the pathway. So we're leading the way on implementing that also. So they were the areas that he wanted us to cover. Helen, happy to take any questions.
As you say, Berenice, it's a great report and lovely to hear you just canter us through some of the headlines. So thank you for that. Any questions or comments on the back of that report? No, happy to note. I think as Sue said when she did her success measure, it does bear a kind of minute or two's reflection, doesn't it, that most organisations that have been dealing with a global pandemic would have said that there wasn't time to bless themselves beyond looking after COVID patients. But the fact that we have not only done transformations that frankly, you know, necessity was the mother of invention, but further transformation that has really enhanced patient experience is just, you know, huge credit, not only to the improvement team for their leadership of this agenda, but for the extent to which that whole improvement challenge has been taken up right across the trust. So all credit to the people who've been involved and to our executive colleagues for having created that climate during a difficult time. So thank you for the update, and thanks to John, which you must relay on his return. So that brings us on to the next section of the agenda, which is engagement and involvement. And of course, we have the joint meeting of NED and governors recently, which Margaret and Jane led. And just to have a few headlines back to Council of Governors now, if we may, please.
Margaret, would you like me to start? So one of the things that we picked up at the last meeting was about communication. We'd had some issues really specifically about cascade of information to governors, which we have resolved with the good officers of Nicola and Margaret and Helen and a few others of us working alongside Carly to make sure that we've got that absolutely right. And I'm pleased to say that governors are reporting really positive feedback on that now, so that's really good. But actually what Carly did was came and talked us through her strategy around communications and how she sees the organisation going forward in terms of how we sell ourselves to our communities, how we make sure that our communities know what's happening, make sure we know our staff know what's happening, make sure we know that our governors are fully informed as well. So that was our focus for the meeting. There were a few other items, and I don't know whether Margaret you wanted to just pick up. There was you did a discussion on the lead governor role and about the process in terms of recruitment into that role when you end your term of office. You want to say a few words on it?
Yes, just very briefly. I mean, I tried to, but obviously, just to alert people that this is my final year. I can't stay anymore. You can get rid of me at the end of the year. So we will be having to appoint a new lead governor at the end of the year, hopefully before the end of the year, so that there can be a bit of a transition. So just really I talked a little bit about the role as I see it, what I do that's perhaps different from the rest of the governors, the sort of things that I've been involved in. We did have a little discussion which I need to pick up, which just reminded me that I need to pick up with our constitution, because at the moment I think our constitution says that the lead governor has to be a public elected governor, and we need to clarify that, because a question was asked as to why that was and is that required. But I think I think at the time we felt that it was probably something that's actually nationally fixed, but we need to clarify on that. But yes, it's it's really just a matter of the process is that at some point in the year people will be asked to nominate themselves if they're interested in being the lead governor. And obviously if there are more than one person puts themselves forward, then there will be an election of the council to that post. So it was just really to put people in mind that that will need to happen not too far away in the year, and hopefully, anyway, if anyone wants to ask any questions to me directly, I'm more than welcome to talk them through what it's like, what it feels like to be a lead governor, to give them an idea of what they're letting themselves in for. So more than happy to do that. So we open that discussion there, and the opportunity is there for people to be thinking about it in the next few months.
I'd also like to say that we have managed to pursue some of the more thorny items that have been kind of sitting about for a little while. So I've been in communication with Pervez to make sure that his questions on mortality have been answered. He raised them through Council of Governors. He's brought them through Quality Assurance Committee. I know he's now had a response, and I know that he's having a meeting with the team. And I know that there's a national drive around the way that data on mortality is actually presented, and there's some changes that are being recommended on that. So hopefully we'll be able to tie that together in a way that is very acceptable to Pervez. I also wanted to say that we've collected only a small number of items from people. We're trying to do a balance of presentations so that we can make sure that governors are really well informed on particular topics. And so we always ask the question, and Nicola has been coordinating it for me. But at the moment, I think the nutty, thorny items that people want to raise are around finance, looking at the performance report and kind of understanding how that works. So there was a bit of an overlap between those two things and induction, but those are still sitting with us. And I wondered about some of the things that we've been talking about this afternoon, if people might be interested in some of the improvement work, particularly around some of the kind of virtual working type scenarios that some people have asked questions about. So again, if there are things that people would like us to take on board for those meetings, again, please can you come forward with them, because we really want those meetings to be useful. It's great that we get the comments from you, and it's great that we're able to answer questions, but it is our opportunity to have things, to explore things in detail. Margaret?
Just wondering, since a couple of people have asked about it, whether this Dr. Link would be a useful thing to have at an Neds and Governors meeting, so people understand a bit more about. Just a thought that's occurred to me while I've been sitting here.
Thanks, Margaret. Great minds think alike, and given that we've got Keith in our midst often, then that would be a really, really good topic, I think. So, Nick, if you'd make a note of that. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you both. That's great. Anybody else want to reflect on it who was at the meeting, or anybody who wasn't at the meeting to ask any questions of Margaret or Jane? Oh, happy to note, in which case we're going to go on to the items from the Governor's pre-meet. So at the Governor's pre-meeting, there were 8 items mentioned, one of which, well, a subset of one of which was the Dr. Link one. I'm going to just list them so that everyone knows what the summary of the issues is, particularly executive colleagues who won't have been in the pre-meet. John Thorpe will, as he always does, list them out in a table and provide a formal response on behalf of the Trust to all the items that were raised by governors in the pre-meeting, not least of all so you've got something to hand if you need to go back to a constituent, which can often be helpful to have it, in black and white. So I'm not putting executive colleagues under any pressure to comment today, but insofar as you'd like to make a comment today on any of these items, feel free. So the first one was from Mike Grundman, and it was about discharge where a surgical patient needs a daily dressing. And the discharge has suggested that this daily dressing will be provided by primary care, only for the patient to discover that the first available appointment with the HCA is in 3 weeks, after the event. And that, there was some evidence from constituents that that whole process of discharge from the hospital, where there is dependence on care and support from primary care, is not working seamlessly, either for the patient or possibly for us or for primary care. And some explanation of how it's meant to work, and what are the factors when it doesn't work, and what is it we're doing to make sure it works well consistently, was the line of questioning. The second one was from John Kay, and it picks up 2 points. One is about the time it's taking to fill prescriptions in the hospital pharmacy. It was quite interesting. I was down there today actually, and it's really good because it's got a little ticker tape saying when you should come forward for your prescription. But I did notice that there must have been at least 15 people on the list and in the queue. So the point John was raising is that it can take a while. Everyone understands why it needs to take a while. But there's 2 things. One is when people are outpatients and they have a prescription, is it possible for them to get that from the local pharmacy rather than the hospital so that they don't have to sit in the queue in the first place, and certainly don't have to come back into the hospital if that's an unnecessary journey. And allied to the issue of journeys, when car parking charges do get reinstated, if there is a delay to patients because of this, what might we think is appropriate in order not to incur excessive and unnecessary cost on people. So there's a kind of important bag of issues there too. I was very sorry to hear from Frank on the recurrent issue of orthotics and the service from Blatchfords. Frank has personal experience of this and can attest to the fact of an 18-month delay from referral to a specialist calibre being prepared. We've had reports back to the Council of Governors about when we contract services out to third parties, what sort of measures we have about specifying the service and holding the contractor to account against that specification. And it would appear time and time again that we are being let down in this regard. So I think that is really important that we revisit that. And of course, there's an allied point to this that again relates to parking, which is, if you're bringing somebody who has got mobility problems to the trust, as both Frank and indeed Margaret have experienced recently, the disabled parking is full of people who are not displaying disabled badges. As Norman and subsequently raised, whilst it's good that people aren't currently having to pay car parking charges for reasons we understand, there may be some abuse of it with people parking at the hospital and hopping on the bus to go and about their business in Chesterfield. So there's a bag of issues there around car park management, whether it's pressure from extra pressure from the community, whether it's inappropriate use of disabled parking, or whether it's about any periods of free or extended parking that might be necessary. But we're aware there are delays in the provision of our own services. So a bag of issues there. And then we heard from Nick, and Nick enjoyed his place visit very much, except for the fact that he was greeted in many places, notably in Anvers, but there were others with a lot of clutter on the corridors. And clutter on corridors is well known to us, and it's well known to us because we see it. But every time the CQC come, they tend to see it too. So they do remind us about the importance of clutter on corridors. And of course, clutter on corridors is related to fire risk and compliance with our own fire evacuation plans, which of course Norman was able to throw helpfully further light on. So there was a question, a very reasonable question, about whilst we wait for ward upgrades and whilst we have big plans for the future quality of our estate, is there more urgent action around all of that? And there was a helpful simultaneously exchange in the chat about, we know that Krishna has got help from UHDB in us looking at the whole kind of approach to fire risk management. But, what are the urgent actions is not an unreasonable question. The next one was a 3-part one from Ruth. Is for some further information about our approach to reducing plastic waste and recycling, not least of all, I am after 2 years of intensive use of PPE, masks and other items. The second was about digital and Dr. Link, which we've already covered. And the third was around a recent meeting at her surgery of the PPG, and a issue about when a consultant of the hospital writes to the GP that apparently in relation to this particular surgery, the letters always seem to go to the lead or managing GP, not to the patient's GP. And Mike was able to reflect from his time at the trust when, you know, that was a more common practice to be more particular about writing to the actual GP who had referred the patient in for treatment. But it would appear that that's not always what happens now. Eddie did put some helpful notes in the chat to say that this had been discussed with GPs, and apparently there was some feedback from GPs that it's more helpful to them to have it at a central point. So I don't know, you know, what the rights and wrongs are all of this, but it would be helpful to have some insight into whether or not we're doing it in a way that works well for us, works well for GPs, and works well for patients in due course. And then the next ones we've done about parking. So the last one on my list is appointment letters from Royal Primary Care. So an appointment letter went out with a reminder about an appointment rather, and then a cancellation went out both within minutes of each other. And when the patient was subsequently contacted by phone to be told the appointment was cancelled, and when the patient mentioned the fact that they'd received both these communications more or less simultaneously, the colleague at Royal Primary Care didn't seem to understand the system. So the question is, do we have a problem there? And if so, what might be, and do we need to do anything about it? And then I'm normally meticulous about taking these notes. I've got item 8, and item 8's blank, but thankfully I've got Mike Grundmann's initials beside it. So Mike, did you come back in with a last item that I have neglected to write down, in which case I'm very sorry. Hi there, Mike. Anyway,
Helen, I think the question was, do we actually have district nurses anymore?
That was Mike earlier on, and I've done that one,
Yeah.
but I've now written down number 8, MG, and I've no number 8.
I didn't have. There wasn't anything else. I was shaking my head, so I didn't turn my mic on.
You're not on my screen, sorry. So thank you. So maybe there wasn't one. Maybe I thought you were going to come in, and I was getting ready to write it down. So I'm glad I haven't lost the plot on that one. So that's good. So can I just check? Oh, Margaret, can I come to you?
Sorry, that's an old hand. Sorry, I just hadn't.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Sorry.
So as I say, John will come back with detailed answer to all of those. Are there any of those that executive colleagues have a burning desire to pass any comment or reflection on now? No. Can wait. Okay, Berenice.
The only one is the orthotics one. I mean, I could give a kind of rough answer to most of them, but the orthotics one, I just think it's just so disappointing. And can you keep badgering us about it? Because we've actually escalated this via the CCG through Bridget Stacey, who's the chief nurse. They have commissioned a separate service, which is separate from ourselves, which is it's a bit of an issue, and we understood that this had been resolved. So please do keep coming back to us, but we'll escalate this one again. It's not acceptable at all. Thanks.
Thanks, Berenice, and it's nice to know you've got a grip of it, because we know then good things will happen. So thank you. So that brings us on to governor feedback. So this is a slot on the agenda if governors have been out and about or at different meetings, or anything that there is to report back. Is there anything to report back? Margaret?
Oh, I usually mention the Derbyshire Engagement Committee that I attend on our behalf, and there was one in May, so since our last meeting. And they're really one of the main things that's being discussed is the engagement strategy going forward for Joined Up Care Derbyshire, and a document was shown to us, which is being submitted. Somebody did raise the salient point about, yeah, this is all very well, but have we got the funding to deliver it within the system? And nobody really had an answer to that. You know, it could well be that funding will be a problem to actually deliver the engagement strategy that that they're wanting to do. So a little bit of discussion about Glossop having been incorporated into our ICS, and there may be some issues coming becoming problematic in the future, because there are some clinical practice differences between Glossop and our ICS, and that might raise some issues which will have to go to public consultation perhaps in the past, but I won't go into the detail of that. And the only other thing I wanted to just say in relation to the system, it sort of feeds back to a little bit about what Deborah was commenting. Although, you know, at the moment we can't directly affect what happens, you know, in terms of the wider things like Deborah was talking about, sort of, you know, things being linked into public transport, etc., etc. We've all now been sent the new documents out for consultation about how governors will work within the system, and we will now be charged to actually make sure that the board is taking into account the wider system. That's now, you know, going to be part of the remit. So whilst we may not be able to influence things directly, we are, you know, please read those consultation documents, because it does slightly change our focus a little bit in terms of how we hold the board to account. And we already do have it in our measures of success about system working, but that actually is being put into now a more formal context, that will be the role of trust governors going forward, to actually look at how we operate within the system. So I know those documents are a bit wordy. I think they probably have to be, because they are, you know, kind of legally binding documents in many ways, but try and have a look through them and just, you know, understand how that will actually change slightly the role of the governors.
I wonder also, Margaret, would it be good to use the NED-COG session for a bit of a teach-in on the kind of key elements of those documents?
Yeah, that would be very helpful, probably. Yes, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
I see James nodding as well.
Questions, and it might be quite nice to discuss them and discuss the practicalities of what that means.
Yeah.
So we'll note that one too. So thanks for that, Margaret. Pervez, please.
I will briefly say something about what John raised, that there is delay in prescribing medicine through the pharmacy here. We are under legal obligation with the primary care to supply them 2 to 4 weeks of medication when patients leave hospital, or when patients' medications get changed in the outpatient clinic. And to avoid delay, my usual recipe was to tell patients, once I prescribe you medications, go to the pharmacy first, and then go for ECG or blood test or whatever. By the time you have done your ECG and blood test, your medications would be ready.
Well, there speaks the voice of experience, Pervez, and sometimes the simplest solutions are the best, aren't they? So that sounds like a cost-free improvement to the end-to-end process. So thank you for sharing that. Was it this particular issue you wanted to come back on, Margaret?
Yeah, just really going back to my past experience as well. It's amazing how things come around. When I left Chesterfield all those years ago, the exact same problems were being raised about delays in pharmacy with medicines. But the other point about it's not always straightforward to send people out to get the medications from the GPs, because a lot of the medications that we're using in secondary care are quite specialised, and it would be really hard to get hold of some of them from your local pharmacy. So I think that's another, you know, it doesn't mean that we can't, you know, and we shouldn't actually have a look at the situation, but there are difficulties in sending everything out to primary care, because some of the community pharmacies just wouldn't have the specialist medicines as well.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you for that, Margaret. John, please.
Hello, everybody. Apologies for not being available for the first meeting. I did explain the reason why to Nicola and Helen this morning. One question that I need as the representative of the governors on the Hydration and Nutrition Committee. I raised the issue of staff bringing food into the fridges, and vulnerable patients. And that this was picked up by an environmental health officer. That is, I just wonder if there's any follow-up to this or what's happening.
That's a very good question. Jane?
It was raised at NEDCOG, John, and it was for passing forward to Krishna as part of risk management, health and safety and risk.
Okay, it's all right. I've got another meeting of the that committee at the beginning of July, so I'd like to be able to give them something back.
We'll make sure you've got something by then, John.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, John. So, if that concludes the governor feedback items, we have the minutes as a consent item. So we will. We've had no prior notice of anybody wanting to raise anything, so we'll deem those approved. Then there's any other business. Does anybody have any items of any other business? No, doesn't look like it. In which case, the next meeting is on the 20th of July. Goodness me, we'll be definitely half past summer then. And the last item on the agenda is a review of the meeting. So we always invite a few reflections on how the meeting went. And I wonder if I might, first off, invite reflections from our two new governors. So could I ask Lucy and Jack whether this was kind of what you were expecting, or better or worse, or if you're thoroughly confused or delighted to be amongst our number?
I'm happy to kick that off, if that's okay. No, I think it follows kind of what I was expecting a little bit. So for me, this is all quite new anyway. Been a councillor for not very long and kind of starting to get involved in these kind of meetings. It's kind of what I expected. I know from volunteering at Derbyshire Law Centre that kind of follows a very similar type of format. One thing that has impressed me is that everything has stayed pretty concise. The meeting's been managed really well, just in terms of following through, with the main items that have been on the agenda and everything. The discussion from kind of whenever we started, was it at 1:30, has followed on quite succinctly. So from my experience, it's been useful to listen into the conversation, and it's gone very well.
Thanks, Jack. If you volunteer at the Derbyshire Law Centre, you might well know a former governor colleague of ours, Alan Crawford, who did an awful lot of work there. And
yes, yeah, I'm familiar.
Great esteem on this group and did some wonderful work for us too. So if you see him before we do, you must remember us all to him, please.
Yes, I will.
Lucy, how was it for you?
Yeah, I just thank you very much for letting me join in. I think in the main it was what I expected. There are a few areas for myself in terms of development to get to grips with, and maybe offline some people to contact just so that I can get a bit more familiar with some of the jargon and some of the issues. But yeah, very interesting, and I look forward to the next year and taking part in those challenges with all of you. So thank you very much.
Lucy, thank you. Caroline, I don't know if it's your first meeting, but certainly your first meeting as HRD. How was it for you?
I think it's certainly my first meeting as the HRD. I think the breadth of topics that covered, and the time that people obviously dedicate to the role of being a governor, I think has really impressed me, actually, to be honest. And the questions and the feedback from our NEDs and other executive colleagues, I think, is just something that is slightly different than that which I've seen before, and I really look forward to being part of it moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. In which case, as it's 15, I was going to say 1559, but that's 1600. We should probably draw a line under proceedings, as we said we would. My huge thanks to you all as ever And to echo Caroline's sentiments, these meetings would not be as good as they are if it wasn't not only for your full participation in them, but the work governors clearly do in advance to get to grips with the papers. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you all on the 20th of July, if not before. So take care and see you soon.